In Georgia, they just wrapped up a special grand jury where they were trying to decide whether or not to charge Trump or some of his affiliates for trying to overturn the election in 2020. Of course, this was all based off of a lie, which is that Trump called Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and pressured him to just find 11,000 more votes. Well, the transcripts say differently, and you're going to meet the foreperson of that special grand jury right after this.
A grand jury that investigated possible election interference by former President Trump is talking publicly about it for the first time. She spoke with NBC's Blaine Alexander.
After 8 months of secrecy, tonight, a rare look inside the Georgia special grand jury charged with investigating whether former President Trump broke the law in trying to overturn his 2020 election loss in the state.
Now, right off the bat, I want you to notice there that they're not saying that they're investigating whether or not Donald Trump tried to overturn the election. They're investigating whether or not him trying to overturn the election broke the law. So he's guilty, obviously, of trying to overturn the election. We don't need evidence for that.
What do you want people to know about this process and about your work?
That really, when it came down to it, we were just people looking into something, and that's worth it.
Emily Kors served as foreperson. She is limited in what she can share. A judge ordered deliberations must stay under wraps.
I'm pretty sure what the judge meant by that was don't go make media appearances talking about this.
But Kors confirms the jurors did recommend indictments against multiple people.
It's not a short list.
So we're talking about more than a dozen people?
I would say that, yes.
Are these recognizable names that people would know?
There are certainly names that you would recognize, yes.
She would not say whether that includes the former president, but did say this.
I don't think that there are any giant plot twists coming. I don't think that there are any, giant, that's not the way I expected this to go at all. I don't think that's in store for anyone.
The group wrote a 9-page report, only part of which has been made public. Now the DA must decide who, if anyone, should be indicted.
Now there's something important to realize there, in that this is a special grand jury, and all they can do is recommend that the DA charge these people or bring indictments. They can't actually charge themselves, which is what a grand jury would normally be for. So this is really just a bunch of theater to begin with. So if that little bit alone wasn't enough to convince you that this Trump deranged goofball is a nut job, well, here's her CNN interview. Oh, and what's funny about this is when you go to the CNN website and look at this video clip, they put random juror in quotation marks. And I'm not really sure what they meant by this. Do they mean that they're not saying she's random, somebody else said she's random? I don't know. Let's watch the clip.
Donald Trump put out a statement last week about the partial report that the judge did release, the pages that he did. And the way that he described it is he said that yet your report means total exoneration for him, is how he put it in his statement. What's your reaction to that, Emily?
I did see that today, which was fascinating. I'm not positive he read the right document. But I will say that if what he was talking about was our statement where we indicated that there was no evidence of widespread fraud or widespread vote fraud in the Georgia 2020 election, that might have been what he meant. Other than that, I'm not positive what he meant by that. I'd be interested to know.
I'm sure we will hear more from him after after it all comes out. You know, the portion of the final report that has been released, there's another portion. That part that you just talked about was of great interest to a lot of us. But also the other portion that obviously demands a lot of attention is also the portion, and I'll read this for everyone, where you all wrote, a majority of the grand jury believes that perjury may have been committed by one or more witnesses testifying before it. Is perjury the crime that you all believed was the main crime you all believe was committed?
I wouldn't say that. I would say that it ended up included there because it was less pointed of a suggestion than some of the other things we may have written in the parts of the report the judge chose to keep confidential.
Like
I would say that
less specific to a person.
Right, right. I would say that we thought it was important to keep it separate as well. Okay, I will say that I thought it was important to keep it separate as well, at least in my opinion, not anybody else's but mine, that there's a difference between the crimes we were called to investigate and crimes that were committed in the room.
What she's saying is there were crimes that they were there to investigate, and they also had the responsibility of bringing up any crimes that were committed by the witnesses, such as perjury. So that would be like in a regular trial, the jury having to decide whether or not the defendant is guilty of perjury along with whatever crime they were charged with. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
How would you describe the strength of the evidence that was put before you?
The strength of it.
Was it clear cut?
We heard a lot of very compelling things. Like a lot of very compelling evidence. A lot of very interesting things and things that we didn't expect. We discovered a lot as we went.
Like, we know that you all heard at least one call that Donald Trump was on during this period. This is the infamous call that the whole world has heard as it was released when he was speaking to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. But in terms of just calls and recordings of calls, are there others of those?
I can tell you I heard other phone calls. I don't think I could name all of them right now if I wanted to. After 75 witnesses in 8 months, it gets hard to keep all your bits straight.
Other calls that Donald Trump was on?
Yes. I'm positive I have heard the president on the phone more than once.
Some of the big name witnesses who came before you, they really fought against coming before you. They didn't want to testify, but they were forced to. They were told by the judge that they needed to, like Mark Meadows, Donald Trump's former chief of staff. What stood out to you from his testimony?
Mr. Meadows didn't share very much at all and was not very willing to speak on much of anything. He asserted his rights under the Fifth Amendment and under executive privilege, which he absolutely had the right to do. And that was pretty much that.
What a shady guy using his constitutional rights like that.
You know, this wasn't just a few days of jury duty. I've been kind of thinking about this as we were going to speak today. I mean, this was more than 7 months of your life, and dealing with one of the most closely scrutinized investigations in recent political history. I mean, what is your lasting impression of this process, Emily?
I've loved being a part of this process. I think it's amazing to actually be able to be a part of this process for once. I think it's a privilege to be able to actually be a part of the system for once and making it work. This has been fascinating.
Who's excited about jury duty? That's about the moment that I knew she was foolish.
To get this peek into the world of like politics and of all these different, of government and of all these different things, and, you know, have the curtain lifted just a little bit and let us peek in as regular people has been amazing. And I'm so glad that I did it.
And so after that, when it's all said and done and the DA makes her final decision on charging, what do you say to people who question your findings or want to say that your investigation, what you all were doing in that room, was influenced by politics?
I think that's the opposite. I think that by choosing to have a grand jury, by choosing to impanel regular people, they very specifically chose to avoid politics, to take bias out of the question.
Yeah, because none of this has to do with politics. None at all.
Because they chose to get, instead of anyone else, they chose to get 16 random people. They could have gotten, you know, if they had wanted someone who was just going to support their opinions, they could have gone and hired a bunch of legal experts. There were all kinds of choices that could have been made there, but they chose to get a random sampling of the population of the area, and I think that speaks really strongly to them trying to avoid bias in any way and trying to avoid politics.
Now, I want you to note that she's totally unbiased.
After everything that you've seen, what would your reaction be if the DA decides against bringing any charges after what you've seen?
I will be sad if nothing happens. Like that's about my only request there is for something to happen. I don't necessarily know what it is. I'm not the legal expert. I'm not the judge. I'm not the lawyers, but I will be frustrated if nothing happens. This was too much information, too much of my time, too much of everyone's time, too much of their time, too much argument in court about getting people to appear before us. There was just too much for this to just be, oh, okay, we're good, bye.
Now, I'll tell you, if she's going to be sad and frustrated that nothing happens, she's not unbiased. And you can't decide someone's guilt or someone's criminality based on how much hard work you had to put into investigating. If that was the predicate on what we charged people for, well, we could just say, look, I worked on this case for 6 months. I haven't found anything, but look, I put a lot of work into it, and I think we should just go ahead and indict you.
And if it was just a perjury charge or perjury charges, would that be acceptable to you?
That's fine. I will be happy as long as something happens.
Now, there are a lot of legal experts coming out saying that this woman is making a huge mistake. And there's other things that have come out, like she swore in someone while holding a Ninja Turtle ice pop that she got from the prosecutor's office. And this could really ruin any kind of chance of them indicting anyone. So it's, once again, they shoot themselves in the foot when trying to go after Donald Trump. But we hear for, 6 or 7 years now that he's committing crimes in plain sight. And he's a criminal. But where are the indictments? We've seen plenty of DAs try, but they just can never find anything. But at the same time, we're going to ignore the actual obvious crimes going on with the president and his family. Just a thought. If you enjoyed this and you got something out of it, please hit that thumbs up button because it really helps me get this out to more people. And if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. Thank you for watching. Until next time, peace be with you.